tell my younger self as far as writing stuff? Because a lot of this stuff is organic. You learn it as you go.
It's strange. It's nothing I ever expected.
I want to tell my stories by eliciting emotion in my audience.
So it's an organic process. They sort of layer on top of each other. Each one makes the next layer more obvious to me.
This whole thing could not have gone any smoother.
I usually say squat only in groups of 3. I like your batches, like squat, squat, squat.
Look, guys, this one's not going to be like normal. It's just not.
Welcome to the Writer's Journey. I'm your host, Lauren Moore, and with me is the Melwith, who is Kayleen Williams.
That's a big difference. It's like, are you talking or are you doing? What's happening here?
We still have all the pets that think, oh, it's time to eat. It doesn't matter if it's 4 a.m.
My name is Walt, and this is Coffee and Concepts on Keystroke Medium.
Yes, that intro always pumps me up. We hope it pumped you up out there in Keystroke Land. Welcome back to the Writer's Journey. And we are asking, have you ever received feedback on your stories, whether from a professional or a friend, that said, if you do just this one thing, teeny little thing, it'd make the plot or characters better? Did you listen? Should you listen? That's the big question on our minds here at TWJ. When does critique help or harm? And how can we tell the difference? We've got Kat Fieler and Ellen Campbell on today, who faced this very question head on and pressed through to make a book better. We'll be talking about this and more live. Welcome.
Hi, and welcome Rick Partlow and Trekker Charlie D. And we've got some other folks watching, so hello, wherever you are at. Oh, I'm excited about this topic today. This is like one of those topics that, as you write your manuscript, and then you get your first set of eyes on, and instantly the feedback comes on. Before you were like writing by yourself, and now the feedback's there, and sometimes it's awesome, and you're like, yes, that's exactly what I needed. And sometimes you have no idea what to do with it. So, ladies, thanks for coming on and helping us to get some ideas and clarify.
Good to be here.
Good to be here. I think my camera's frozen, but yeah.
Oh, no.
It froze in a lovely position. So it's like, you don't have like a funky face going on. So that's
yes.
Did it on purpose. It's my better side.
If it was me, my face would have been like...
Yeah, me too.
Well, how have you been, Ellen? I haven't seen you in a while, but your wall looks lovely behind you.
Thank you. I'm pretty happy with this particular wall. It came out nice. I've been good. I'm moving. I'm a lot more relaxed, a lot calmer. I think my blood pressure is averaging about 50 points lower, so that's all good. Yeah.
How are the puppers liking the new house?
They're liking it. I've got one sleeping on my foot right now.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. What more could you want?
Okay.
And Kayleen, how have you been?
I have same old same, except my little minion decided that she wanted to play tennis at her school. So now I've got tennis matches to go see. She won 2 out of 3 yesterday. Yes. 2 out of 3 matches. So that was awesome. She's loving it. So the 2.5 hours of tennis standing around.
Wow.
It's worth it so long as she's enjoying it.
Her first ever match, and then she just beats
everybody.
Owns face.
She's doing good.
Kayleen, the tennis mom.
Yeah.
Apparently, yeah.
Did you ever thought you would be a tennis mom?
No.
It's gotta be better than soccer mom. At least it's a little more esoteric.
Ooh.
Yeah. My only thing is there's not really any I wouldn't say rules, but like guidelines for the audience, because it's not really an audience, just the parents and siblings who show up for the things for their other siblings. And there was these two that were like football screaming. And I couldn't, and it was distracting my minion. It was distracting their own team. There's like 6 games going on at the same time, so everyone just keeps like looking over, like, what is that? So I finally had to go to the coaches and be like,
can you do something?
I was like, I'm not trying to be this mom, but
do you think that's a strategy? Is that like a parent strategy? Like get your kid pumped, but also kind of distract the competition?
According to the parent behind me, it was they condoned it, and I was just like, no, I don't condone this. It's not cool, not especially when it's distracting everybody. Anyway, so
well, speaking of distractions, this week I was really caught up in the AI debate. I don't know if you're following that on Facebook and Twitter, but should authors be using AI? It's a tool, but also, we want to be really excellent in our writing and kind of challenge ourselves. So there's a lot of different sides. There's a lot of different perspectives. Meanwhile, the editing project I was working on, it's book 9 with an author I've worked from his very first book. And I'm reading it and seeing such like progress in this guy's writing. I'm amazed. And I'm thinking an AI could never do this. It could never. Right? Because it can't create. It can take something and make more of the same, but it can't progress like this guy, like a human can learn. So it's just been a week of thinking about all of this processing through my brain pan. But yeah,
it's an interesting argument.
Yeah, well, yeah, there's a lot to say there on kind of both sides of it. Different perspectives, but we're gonna think about that. We're thinking about that on Keystroke Medium. Anyway, so for today's topic, we're talking about humans taking a manuscript. Something that you've labored on for weeks, months, even years, and now you're opening up your writer's door to the first set of readers, and those could be a critique group, it could be an author group. But Kat, if you could just introduce yourself to the audience, share who you are, and tell us a little bit about your story and this journey that your manuscript went on.
Hi, I'm Kat Fieler. I have my first book is coming out in June 1st. It's The Shadowrunner, and then 2 and 3 are hard on the heels of that. Thank you. Ellen was my first editor because before this book came out, it was actually a short story for a Sam Peralta anthology. And it was a steampunk in the Drifting Isles or something like that. Yeah. And that never happened. And then they gave us all back the rights. So Ellen was the first one to see it, and she was the first one to tell me she thought it was a novel. So, yeah. So here we are.
It was a great story. I really enjoyed it. It was the world building was good. The visual was good. There's a lot of detail that really fleshed things out. And then the characters were believable and quirky, and I was really impressed by it.
So it started out as a short story, and then Ellen, what caught your eye and made you think this could be a novel?
That there was so much world there to explore, and that the characters could carry one. Sometimes a character just can't, especially from a short story, because it's so limited. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's the tough part. Is short stories, you've really got to focus down to that point. And it can be hard to see, like, can I bridge this out to a novel, 3 novels? And just like you're saying, Ellen, it comes down to how much world is potential within that pinpoint. And so you, Kat, then started flushing out the short story into more novel length. What was that process like before people started looking at it? What was that process like for you?
Well, I had a hard time with the word count as a short story. So I kind of agreed with Ellen that there could be more there. And when I started taking it, then I had to take it out of somebody else's world because the Kindle world went away. So not just the anthology. So then I was trying to turn it into a novel, and then I wasn't even sure what the genre was anymore because I was forced into steampunk to start with, which I didn't know anything about and wasn't sure I was doing a good job. So I really didn't want it to be there. The character wanted to go someplace else. So then once the anthology wasn't a thing anymore, then Ellen and I talked about it, and she kept telling me where she thought it should go, and I agreed with her. And then after I wrote the novel, it didn't stop. It was just kind of like, we'll stop for here, but there's way more to tell. So that's where we are now.
Then Ellen, I might have forgotten, but were you the editor on the anthology, and that's how you got
Yes.
reading the? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So
the
you read it.
anthology kind of died it was one of the ones that got canceled when all the Kindle World stuff kind of imploded.
Yeah. But you got to read a lot of good stories before that happened, and
I read all of them and edited all of them. It was ready to go.
Wow. Man, that's a lot of work.
It was. A lot of good stories.
He Sam said that he might actually bring it back. It's just
yeah?
on the top of his list, I guess. So yeah, he's got so many projects.
I know. He's crazy busy.
Yeah.
All right, so you figured out how to turn it into a novel. Ellen's kind of helping you behind the scenes. Where did the critiques come in that you started getting from?
So a long time ago in another life, I was a member of a number of critique groups, and then we moved to Arizona, to Phoenix, which you would think would be a lot of people there, but there really aren't. Almost all the people in the United States are on one coast or the other, and in the middle there's not a lot of people. So I really struggled to find a group, and then COVID happened, and I got brought into a critique group on a Zoom situation, and that turned into it did turn into a good thing. But for a while, I was a member of 3 different critique groups, and they all had different ideas about where this was going. And I think that what I lost sight of being a new author was that it was my story, that I had the right to say, well, that's a good idea for another book, but that's not where I was going with this. And that really got me sort of sidetracked for a while, and I kept going back to Ellen and then saying, can I get you to edit this new version? And she kept saying, what was wrong with the first one? It's fine. You just need to stop listening to people. So, there's a place for critique groups, but at some point when you've actually got a novel written, you're really ready for an editor. The critique group should have come in earlier, and it was just bad timing for me. So, yeah.
Well, it's easy to lose sight of the fact that not everybody's ideas are good, and that it is your story, and that you don't have to make all the changes that everybody suggests. You're not trying to, yes, on some level you've got to make people happy with the story, but you have to write a good story first, and everybody doesn't always know what you want or where you're going. And it's easy to get that. You can't take everybody's advice, or you'd have, refrigerator magnets or bumper stickers or something.
Yeah. And I had a bad case of the imposter syndrome, which everybody does, but with it being a first novel, I was trying to make everybody happy, and I was thinking of everyone not so much as being critique group, but being my actual readers. And that's fine, but if you pick up a book, it's going to end the way the author wants it to end, but if it's still in development, then people feel like they have the right to say, have you thought about this, or have you thought about that?
Right.
And yeah, so that was where I was, and it was entirely my fault. I was just listening to everyone, trying to make everybody happy.
Can you think of an example of, without giving away a bunch of the plot, but can you think of an example of something that is still standing in the book, or maybe it was one way, you got a critique and you changed it to this way? Do you have an example of kind of that shift?
Yeah, actually the ending, I read the ending to a critique group and they were horrified and said, no, you cannot end it that way. And Ellen hadn't read that ending. I had 3 different endings, and then I tried the second ending, and they said, well, that's all right, but it's not great, And then I went with the one that Ellen had originally seen. Even though it was a short story, she knew where it ended. And so I went back to that. And so that one turned out to be okay. It was the riskier thing for me, because without giving away the ending, it's not what most young women want, and I thought my audience might be YA, and I was a little bit worried that they were going to be mad at me where I leave them. So, but that was the story. So it's where it went.
You have to be true to the story.
Yeah.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I'm kind of thinking I don't want to. I've got a guess too, but I don't want to spoil anything with a guess. That sounds like an intriguing story, and that the ending's going to have a twist in it. Kat, your video might be frozen.
I think so. I tried.
It doesn't want to stay. But you well, I was gonna say she touched on a really on a good point before I lose all my thought processes. So like the ending, right? She had 3 different endings and wound up kind of like going back to the first one, but then within that is audience expectation. You definitely want to like make your audience, your readers, happy. So like if you have a YA sweet romance, it needs to be happy at the ending. You can't just like be broken up and not be together. It's gonna tick off some people. But at the same time, there's that other level of where are the characters in the story really going, and sometimes that's where you can break a little bit of the wall. If it's sort of like, oh gosh, I hate that character died, but it was inevitable, sort of one of those things, rather than I don't know why that person is still living, like, or oh God, that sounded horrible, but you know what I mean. But yeah, that's a really good point, is keeping in mind the juggle between reader expectations and the reality of what story you're actually telling. And sometimes that does take a little bit of a leap of faith in your conviction on what your story is, what you're telling, to do that little bit of a different thing. So yeah.
So if you're someone who likes feedback in the process, if right, then what sort of person could you go to for that feedback? I guess that mastermind kind of feedback, who would know the genre and who would know what kind of expectations readers might have.
I finally figured out that the story isn't steampunk, it's dark fantasy. And which also makes me question whether it's even a YA story. I don't know how, Ellen, if you felt that it was YA.
YA. It could. YA is more mature, I think, than people realize.
Yeah.
And most of the people that read YA are adults. I don't know.
Well, and that's my audience, and this is not a data set I can do anything with, but my audience are women ages 18 to 88, and I don't really know what to do with that. So I don't have a lot of male readers. I have a couple, but they were beta readers, so that's not fair. I can't call that a real reader. They liked it, but so to answer your question, you have to go to a good editor, in my opinion, somebody who's qualified, somebody who has a background. Obviously, Ellen's portfolio speaks for herself, and well, that's actually what kept happening to me. Was I went to this person and that person. I went to a couple of published authors, friends, and said, what do you think? And they had a whole nother story in mind. And now, not that they weren't good stories, but they weren't the one I was writing. And the thing that I kept coming back to, and why Ellen had my back on this, was this is not a romance. It's timely. It's Victorian England, and it talks a little bit about women in that time, and Hollywood has done a real good job of romanticizing that. And this is a rough story. My best comment from an actual critique group was somebody said this is Oliver Twist meets Hunger Games. And once she said that, I knew what I was doing. And but I've been hearing it from Ellen all along. So yeah.
Sometimes it takes getting like this random outside input, because it's like you trust Ellen, like she's got, but then it's like you have all these other little whispers and things. You're like, but they're reputable as well, so it's like I'm not really sure where to go. But then you get that one strong one that's ties everything together, and it's agreeing with the one that you really trust and whatnot, and you're just like, okay, well, that was fun. Listening, going through the roller coaster.
Yeah, I think, Ellen, you once said something about finding the right editors like pouring pancakes. Like you got to keep trying till you get the right pour.
Did I say that?
Yeah.
I did not know I said that.
It stuck with me because I was like, that's so true.
Yeah.
Pancakes are tough, and so is finding an editor.
And you've got to remember with critique groups and friends have your back, but maybe they don't know what they're talking about. And critique groups, face it, I think most people are in critique groups for an ego stroke. And if they get their hands on your story, they're not necessarily doing it for you. They're like showing off, or maybe they're, but they're not seeing it through your eyes. I mean, some of them will be, but a lot of them won't be. You see what I'm saying? And they're not going to have your take on it. Not that you can't get valuable advice from critique groups, but you can. But if somebody's like changing your whole story, then either you're in the wrong business, or that's not really advice that you should try to follow.
I think that's a good point. I think the difference between critique groups and editors is that the editor's whole point of view is your point of view. And when you're in a critique group, you're with a bunch of writers, which it's nice of everybody to, I mean, we're trading services, but still you sit there and listen to somebody's 5 pages or 10 pages. But the thing is to take into your mind the fact that the people that are talking to you are also writers, and they have sometimes not stepped back from the process, and they're saying things, not always, but sometimes they're envisioning where this story might go because they've only heard 5 or 10 pages each time you get together. So they don't know. And that's another challenge too in a critique group, is that, and I'm not telling you that I don't like critique, I do like them, but in the beginning, but you're only a few pages at a time, as where your editor sits down and sees where it's going and where it ends up, and then helps you in that great muddle where you haven't done a very good job. But with everybody else, every time you show up at a critique group, if people are not real good about attending routinely, now you have to give everybody some backstory, and there's only a certain amount of time to do all that. And you can't really catch people up if they haven't been reading it. So I think that in the beginning, just getting used to reading in front of people, critique groups are great. And also they're great in terms of getting the general idea, or maybe helping you with echoes and like the flow, the things that a line editor would do, and the flow and stuff like that. But rarely do you find where you've been through a whole entire manuscript with a group of people. And this is the difference between them and an editor. And like I said, an Ellen, or any good editor, becomes a friend. If your editor is not your friend, you guys aren't going to work together. Yeah. So Ellen became a friend right away.
And you, no, say that one. I can hold it.
Tomasin V says, that's a good way to look at it. An editor is like your personal good faith critique group.
Yeah.
Well, your editor is invested in you, where your critique group might not be.
Yeah.
And you touched on a good point, Kat, that in a lot of critique groups, they're filled with other authors. So being an editor and being an author are two very completely different things. It's two completely different points of view. So if you're like, hey, here is, a basic outline of a story that I'm beginning to write, what do you guys think? You're going to get an author's perspective, which is exactly as you said, the possibilities, rather than how is that connecting? Does it connect? What kind of characters are you going to have in there? How can you best deliver that, show that? Or if you already have a first draft and you're like, what do you guys think of this first chapter? It's, why did you choose this direction or that direction instead of it sometimes can be really quiet, and probably not the right word, but on the difference, but you're going to get slightly different feedback from an author than you would from someone who can take it from an editor's perspective. So that's another thing to keep in mind when you're getting critiques is definitely the type of people that you're getting. If you're writing a romance book, you're probably going to want to talk to more romance authors, editors, readers even, because they are the ones in that world. If you're writing crime thrillers, you definitely want to get into like a thriller group, maybe talk to a police officer who can look at different procedural things that you're doing. But definitely getting closer to the expert, I guess you could say, or the people who who know more, live more in that, definitely going to have a higher chance of getting better feedback than just a general critique group where majority are romance authors, and like you're saying, you're writing a dark fantasy. That's you're gonna get very lopsided critique from a bunch of romance authors than you would from those who write dark fantasy. So
I sympathize though, because finding any critique is not easy. It's not an easy
no,
thing.
it's not. It's not.
So it's easy to get really wrapped up in the critique that you do get.
True.
If you're, and maybe it's not sound. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not.
So if you're looking for a critique partner, you want someone who knows the genre. You want someone who's going to see themselves as on your team and doing it to make your story better. You want someone who can look at the story as a whole as well. That could be another author, that could be an editor, that could be a friend. How do you find the right person to help you sort through your plot and kind of trust that they're helping you write your story and not their own?
I would say that I'm better qualified to do that now because I've been through the process. And because the process, I mean, this book was already really done by the time I started this whole process, and it took me 3 more years. So there was really a period of time when I was trying to figure out who in my group I should listen to. I had a couple of friends who are not authors, oddly, who were some of the best critiques I've gotten, and I talked to the one of them and said, why don't you become an editor? And she says, no, I am writing for my own personal benefit. I don't ever plan to publish any of this. She said it was like therapeutic for her, but she said, I enjoy everybody else's story. And that kind of clicked with me. I thought she's really, for her, this is story hour. When we show up to these groups, she's listening to everyone and enjoying. It's like getting free books for her.
Wow. So
she was really a good one. And then, of course, obviously, a professional editor is somebody that you need to rely on. And by the time I had talked to Ed, I don't even know, Ellen, like the 10th time. At this point, Ellen was like saying, you need to stop this. Just go look for a publisher. Just stop. It's fine. And by that time, I finally I thought, well, I'm just going to leap because it'll never get done. So I just looked for a publisher. Is it the best thing I've ever written? No. Okay. And then but that happens to every author. The next thing you write is the best thing for now. And then the next thing, and then the next thing. So now I'm a lot more qualified to decide who I listen to and who I don't. But you have to go through it.
Right.
I think.
Yeah. And then, Ellen, what were you seeing on your side of things when you're looking at the manuscript? You've read it, but you're also hearing Kat like come to you with like, I heard this. They think I should do this. I think I should make those changes. What were you thinking?
At first I was accepting that she wasn't happy with the story and felt like it needed changes, because I mean, that's a valid way to feel, and maybe it's even true, but I had read her story and I knew how good it really, really was. And she kept coming back with, well, I did this, and so this is what happened, and it became a pattern. It's like, okay, Kat, you've got to stop. You've got to stop. Stop handing your book to other people. Stop listening to what other people say. You need to find the version that you're happiest with, and you need to go look for a publisher. Just stop, because you're making yourself crazy. And she was too. She wanted so much. I mean, she had so much emotionally invested in the book, which of course you do. I mean, you wrote a book, for heaven's sake. But she just she needed the feedback. She needed positive feedback. She needed reassurance before she was able to release it. And she sought reassurance from a lot of people. And I don't think anybody had bad motives, but you can't tennis ball a story like that unless you're in a collaborative relationship, which is not the same thing at all. You can't take everybody's feedback, go away, rewrite the book, and then come back and find a new person and get their feedback and then go away and rewrite.
Yeah.
And, yeah. It wasn't good for her, and it wasn't good for the story.
Yeah. Well, how can you tell if a change is good for the story or not? Like what is it about you're reading the manuscript, you're approaching it. The author thinks, hey, maybe I need to change this. Like, how can you as the editor tell on your side, no, this story needs to stay the way it is, or actually this is the change that needs to happen?
Just like that. I mean, just like you've put it, no, this is great. Don't change this. This is, if you change this, I'll kill you, or whatever. This is great. Yeah, you could change that. If that would make you happier, that's okay. I don't think it's making any difference. But if it makes you happier, I mean, there's levels of change and different items that get addressed. But I've told people, don't change that. That's like central to the story. That's the whole point. Or whatever. But it's an intuitive process. It's not a cut and dried, oh, this is good because of that. It's more, I mean, you have to be in the story, you have to be immersed in the story, you have to be invested in the story. And you have to accept that in the end, the author's going to change whatever they want.
Well, and I also sought an additional editor. We all know who that is, developmental editor, who then pretty much backed up what Ellen said. And that was a little collaborative approach that finally had me break out of the imposter syndrome, because that was really what was going on. I was pretty sure that the minute I turned it, out, that if I got it published or if I did publish it, didn't make any difference either way. I was just going to get 1 stars immediately. So I was like, who do you think you are? Yeah.
Well, Kayleen, what was your perspective when you were brought in?
So I feel like I was brought in for a regrounding of sanity. So it's kind of just like, this is the last ditch effort. Here is exactly where it is that I'm happy with it, I suppose. What do you think as an editor, that Ellen is telling me has a good head on her shoulders for not doing all these things that, other people who are trying to help accidentally did. And so I read through it and, I did my thing. So if there's, for example, going from one scene in place A to place B. And then I'm like, okay, I like this transition, or I like that we're going from A to B, but I feel like we need a half point in here. There's something missing that just connects a little bit more of the emotion, a little bit more of what she's going through between this A and B point. And so I'm not changing the story. I'm not trying to be like, no, she needs to not be an A. We need to change this to G, and then she can go to B. It's just, we need more of what was sort of whispered on in A before we get to B, things like that. And she took all of that and added whole chapters that I was like, yes, that's exactly it. We get more of this world. We get more of what's going on with all the bits and the things, and we get more of the characters and the emotion, before we get to like this extra, the next big step in the main character's journey. So it was nice to be able to kind of like reground and then hear that she's just like, oh, thank you. Because it's really tight. She has a way of saying very little and meaning a lot, which is very difficult to do. And so that was good times. And with that, I'm going to reinsert myself, because today is a very special spotlight is on Shadowrunner by, sorry, I was about to say Cat, but that is not the name on the book. KJ Fieler. There we go. Born, and I hate this word, I'm just going to let you know, I say it 5 different ways every time I say it. So whatever comes out of my mouth, that's what it's going to be. Born to aristocracy, Ada will marry and never want for anything except freedom. She yearns for adventure, lives for her chess games with Papa, and is captivated by family stories of Grandma's escapades in America. However, when a much anticipated male heir is finally born, she'll lose everything and spend the rest of her life tatting lace and having tea with lady friends. A ghostly visitor and a series of seemingly supernatural events unexpectedly delivers Ada from the mundane, but no one could have predicted the darkness that comes with it. Taken in and raised by a secret society, she's forced to abandon her own moral compass when she is required to lie and steal, and is groomed as an assassin. As Ada comes of age, she must uphold the mantle of her mistress and become a predator, targeting members of the very nobility to which she was born. The only other choice is to leave the organization as a fugitive, and if she leaves, she must forsake the two people she loves more than herself, her captor and her adopted sister, both of whom will almost certainly be slain as punishment for her disloyalty. Of Doom! Click now! And it's not out until June 1st. Was it June 1st? June 1st. So yeah, click that pre-order. It's good stuff. It definitely has that like kind of like steampunk vibe, just because of that Victorian era and the different types of technology that you have going on in there. But it definitely is, yeah, more the dark fantasy with the types of imagery with this ghost and the world she winds up thrust in, I will say. So yeah, it's good stuff.
Wow, the layers of intrigue going on in that story are everything I want from a YA novel. That sounds really cool. Kat, you might be frozen again. Oh no.
We'll give it a try here.
It's just refusing. It's refusing. So, oh, there she goes. Nope.
So usually when we talk with an editor, the book is done. This is kind of a special chance that you had Ellen sort of from the beginning and kind of all along. Not every author gets that opportunity, which is really cool. But what are some other ways an author who would like feedback along the way as they're writing the book before they get to they've already completed a draft and they send it off to an editor? What are some ways that they can get help from someone to help process their thoughts, process the plot? I know Kayleen and I we've done some calls in the past. So we like to bounce ideas off of each other. But what can that help look like if someone needs it?
I think that's one of the hardest things. I'm not going to talk too much because I know you've got some thoughts. Both of you have thoughts. But one of the hardest things is just finding people, is finding those groups like Keystroke Medium. We are on Facebook. There are lots of people in there who are just like, hey, I have this story idea. What do y'all think? That people would just be like, here's my thoughts. But that in and of itself is one of the hardest things, because had I never found Keystroke Medium by happenstance, after happenstancing finding 20 books, and someone on 20 books messages me, and that's how I found Keystroke, then I wouldn't have this group, this tribe of people that I can go to when I'm trying to think through some things on different stories, or if I have like a question when I'm editing, I go to Lauren or Ellen. But it's just, having the bravery to reach out and find those places. And if one group you're not vibing with, go find another one, because there are bajillion millions of groups out there that you can go Travelocity with. And
Yeah. So finding a Facebook group is a really good way. Finding an active Facebook group. Kat, what do you think? What are some ways that an author can get feedback during the process of coming up with their plot and writing their novel, the first draft?
For me, one of the most productive things I did, and not everyone can do this, was I went to a writer's retreat. And it was a gift. My husband put some money together and then got together with a friend and got me a scholarship so I didn't have to pay the full price. It was very expensive. And I actually wrote the first 6 chapters of this book at that retreat, and it was in 6 days. So, and that was the current version. So Ellen and I had both agreed that it didn't start where I started it, but I wasn't sure where it started. And I found this at that writer's retreat. And why the retreat was so important to me was because even though there were writers there as staff, the rest of us were all trying to do something. None of us were published, none of us. And all of us were wondering why we even qualified to go. So that was kind of cool. And then it was 6 intensive days with no distraction. Like there was no internet, there were no cell phones. There was nothing. You got up and you started writing, you had lunch, and you went right back to writing, and you went to bed with an assignment before you went to bed. So it was just very intense. And at that place, at that particular retreat is when I ran into, and I'm going to say her name, I hope she's listening, Pam Duncan, became my best buddy on the island. And she ended up coming home and introducing me to other people. And because she and I had clicked, and because she liked the story, and I knew I could trust her because she said, this is not something I would read if I hadn't been forced to listen here. But now that I've listened, I want to read it. Oh. So I knew she was a reader. I knew she could hear this without some idea of where the story was going, just as a person experiencing it. So that led to more.
All right, so look for those writers' retreats and look for a friend who gets you, who gets your story, who clicks with it. It might take a lot of meeting different people before you find that right one, but once you find them, keep them. They're available. They're invaluable. Ellen, what does it look like on the editor side? So how do you help authors along the drafting process?
I don't usually. Well, I take that back. I try not to look at first drafts. It's like my least favorite thing. Well, almost my least favorite thing. Ask me the question again. I just got lost in my own head.
So usually we're in the line and copy editing stage. That's where we're looking at a manuscript. But occasionally we're helping an author before they've even finished the draft. Like they're in the middle of the drafting stage. So you help Kat. With other clients and other situations, how have you helped other authors get through just writing the first draft?
Well, I'm always available for questions. And I'm happy to I'm happy to offer a reasonable amount of time, to help anybody. What do you think of this paragraph? Or this is my idea. What do you think? And I'm happy to talk it over with them or give them a referral or whatever they might need.
Yeah.
In spite of my fearsome reputation, I'm fairly gregarious and I do like to talk to people and I'm interested. So
she's always scary because she's so passionate about it. That was my first introduction to Ellen.
Oh Lord, I think I was hopping up and down with rage.
Yeah, she came running up to me and pulled me off somewhere, and I asked her an editing question, and she just started jumping. She was so excited. And I was just like, oh, this is a person I need in my life because that is the energy I need to soak in for these things.
Oh.
What was I talking about? It's got to be.
Oh God, I wish I could remember. It was.
It wasn't Action Beats. What was it? Maybe it was Action Beats.
It what? No, yeah, the in between.
Uh-huh.
I was like, it's not like a said, but they have their dialogue, and then there's this.
No, it wasn't dialogue tags. I'm pretty sure it was Action Beats.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
When they cut dialogue in half.
Yeah.
Anyway,
he twitched.
But I also wanted to mention, you brought up a good point, Kat, with the retreat. It doesn't always also have to be like a whole retreat. If you could, can be very difficult. I commend anyone who gets whole weekends, to themselves. They don't have to worry about anything else. But if you could get just an hour, if you could get just 30 minutes where you get out of where you normally are, go sit out in the middle of your yard Go to a coffee shop if the sounds of the coffee shop doesn't bother you. I can't do that because it's too much for me going on. Go out to a park. Just get that time away. So it's almost like a mimicked retreat where you force yourself into that frame of mind. I'm going to write. And that could be a great help to, especially like if you're stuck or you're just feeling like I don't really want to do any writing. Put yourself in a new place, in a new environment. Might help.
I also think you need to find your tribe. You talked a little bit about this, and I think you're right. I mean, I know I'm plugging the show, but looking for people here and where are they elsewhere, and whether or not you can connect, because everybody here are people I've run into in multiple places, and I know. Well, that's how I ended up with you, Kayleen. And so I knew where you guys were and what you were about before I approached anybody about the writing. And I think that's a real important thing, is how do you start talking to somebody? Critique groups seem like the right place, and it certainly isn't a bad place to start. But you have to find people who get you and get the story. Yeah.
People who can talk shop with you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then,
I like to have. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, and you need somebody who believes in you too, because I think most authors don't totally believe in themselves to start with. I think that first book is the hardest one.
It really is. It's a hard process.
Grueling world. I have a number of authors who, they get that first book, that second book published, and it's just kind of like here on, the selling line and getting, those reviews in, you kind of get a little disheartened. So it definitely pays to talk to people. Just go talk to people. It might not even be, hey, I saw you on this group and would love to do an author swap with you. Before you come barreling out the big guns, it's something that I can't remember which show it was, if it was our show or live, but if you are looking to do like co-writing with someone, if you're looking to get input from someone, first meet them as a person. Like, hey, I saw this post that you made on whatever group and I loved it. And here's my thoughts on also that topic. And then begin some kind of dialogue where it's similar to whatever it might be their books. But then after you've developed kind of like that relationship where you can message them and be like, hey, how's your day going? Then you can go to them and be like, okay, so I have this paragraph that is just giving me a lot of grief. Is there any way that maybe you could read it and give me your opinion on it? They're going to be a lot more likely to, for one, say yes and actually follow through, because I've gotten plenty of yeses and no follow-throughs. And they'll also have, like Kat was saying, they'll have that personability with you because they'll know you. They'll know more about like what you're writing at that point, what kind of stories that you want to tell. And so when they get to that paragraph, they have more of a foundation to go off of rather than just, here's some words. There's more of a foundation underneath that to help them critique it better. And yeah.
And be open to that kind of approach from somebody else.
Yes. There you go. My thoughts died like right at the end there. I'm sorry. But yeah, so definitely treating people as people, even if like you're coming up to them like you really want their input, but cold calling others is probably not the best idea. Which in a group like a critique group, certainly, I mean that's what it's there for. But if you kind of like hang out in the background of that group and you kind of find people who are giving other people opinions on things, you're like, okay, I like what this person's saying. Just make a comment on their comment. See if there's something that kind of clicks there. and then build from there. It's all a process. It's all a growth, and it doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, because you're really looking for someone who you can call up and bounce ideas off of, or video chat with. Because you want one person, otherwise you're just repeating your plot summary again and again and again to different people. So you really want that one person that can help you just kind of sort through the different possibilities, and then hearing it, saying it out loud to that person and hearing their impression can spark the next idea when you get stuck. But to find that person, you have to you want to call and talk things out with. You want them to be a friend, and a real friend, and not, I don't know, not someone you just bumped into on, I don't know.
I think maybe it's more somebody that you have a connection with. It doesn't matter how long you've been friends. I mean, sometimes you meet somebody and you're best friends forever from that day forward. Right. You just have to, the connection has to be there.
Yeah.
Well, this is one of the reasons I was saying that Ellen became a friend right away. And one thing is, if you're handing, especially in the beginning, if you're handing your work to somebody and then they come back with what you're asking for, which is they're going to criticize, but with a heart and with a positive intention, and well, then that just leads to you guys clicking together. And that happened really quickly with Ellen. She didn't just hand me back the story and say, that was great, put that right out. She wrote, it looked like a murder scene, but she was spot on with everything. And it was, it made me a better writer, but it also instantly made me really understand that I could trust her. And that was something that I really needed to do, was find somebody I could trust.
So she put in the time on her end to really dig in and explain how you can do it better, and what needs improving. And she's suggesting things. So she's proving her buy-in to your story through her effort. Yeah. I've got Walt. Walt is my guy right now. He knows the series that I'm working on, and he's got so much positive energy. So he's a person that I know I can call when I get stuck, which is frequent.
I love Walt. Walt's amazing.
Yeah, and we all know Walt. We all love Walt. Yeah, and the coffees.
Yeah, he hasn't done one in a while, has he? Copying concepts.
He's busy.
I know. He's got like 10,000 million always things going on. I don't know where he gets his energy.
Yeah.
Coffee. I'm tired just thinking about it.
Yeah.
So this has been I think a good discussion, because it's, how do I want to say this? A lot of people kind of just want like the easy button. Like, where do I go to just find the people that are going to tell me the things I need to know? But a lot of it really just comes down to, you need to start making those relationships with others. You need to converse with people, see if you click, and go from there. Which can be really hard for authors. Where majority of us are introverted, don't leave our houses, would rather, Fred Meyer and Amazon deliver our groceries to us so we don't have to people. That's us. But once I can attest to, once you really truly find your tribe, you're gonna know it. It's not gonna be a mystery. It's like, oh, but can I really talk? You'll just know that you can message them. Thank you, Kat and Ellen, for coming on and chatting with us. Did you have any other last minute questions, Lauren, Ellen?
I had one, along your lines. I just wanted to make the point that not all advice is created equal. Mm-hmm. And you should seek out good advice, but it's on you to decide which advice is good. So be careful while you're making that choice. Oh.
Yeah. And I think in your heart of hearts, because I came back to Ellen at the end. It was with me all along.
And that can be one of the toughest things, is saying when it's done and letting it lie, letting it fly, go do what it needs to do. Other people read it. And knowing in yourself exactly what Ellen is saying. Not all opinions are going to work for what you're writing, but you are the one that knows what you want to write the most. So if you're coming at it, you're like, I've got this sci-fi fantasy, merged story that I want to write, and someone comes to you and they're like, that's going to be really difficult to sell. You should just make it all sci-fi or all fantasy. You could do that. And that is very solid advice, because it can be difficult to market a blended genre. It's like, where do you put it? Do you put it in sci-fi? Do you put it in fantasy? There's like a whole other issue there. But at the end of it, you have to ask yourself, but is that the story I'm writing? So even though there could be good advice, does it work for what you're writing? And you need to have the conviction to say thank you, but no thank you. I'm going to keep it the way it is. But yeah, with that, don't be afraid of critiques. Don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help in critique groups in places like Keystroke Medium, or even friends and family if they're interested in what you're doing and they want to hear, even if it's just you're doing great. It's always nice to get positive feedback, and trust in your process and your own story and what you're writing, and always weigh that against someone else's opinion or someone else's critique. Yeah.
Too many cooks spoil the broth.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be really tough navigating a kitchen if you got 15 people in there.
Yeah.
All at the same time. Alrighty, and with that, thank you, Kat, for coming on and joining us. Everyone, go check out Shadowrunner. It is good stuff. Comes out June 1st. In 2 weeks, we have a couple ideas for a show topic that we are mulling over. So be sure to check us out 2 weeks from this Friday for another writer's journey, where we're going to talk about more reading, writing, and everything in between, right here in Keystroke Mediums.